Despite winning on Saturday, there's a fair amount of criticism that is going on amongst the Duck community. But what's fair and what's foul regarding Oregon's performance against Wisconsin? Plus, I'm showing my gratitude for great performances against the Badgers, handing out some Week 9 Holy Wallowa Awards. The climb to the top continues here on That Show Out West.
This place has everything. In fact, the grass is damn green in Eugene.
That performance deserves a Holy Wallowa.
It's a feeling you cannot explain.
This place is louder than any other venue in the Big Ten.
This program is staged to compete and to win championships.
Welcome to the Big Ten, Oregon!
And welcome to That Show Out West for That Team Out West. I'm Ted LaRue. Happy Monday. Happy 7-1 Monday. 7-1. 8 down, 4 the go. How the hell did we get here so quick, man? Oregon, of course, happy bye week. Happy Halloween week as well. 4 games to go. I remember back in the summer, I said, this is the time. Following the Wisconsin game, bye week, of course, going into that Iowa game at Kinnick. That is not going to be easy. Hawkeyes are playing some pretty good football out there in Iowa City. But I remember during the summer, this is the time when you want to be playing your best football. Maybe not the best performance of the year Saturday night in Austin against Wisconsin. Maybe Mother Nature had something to do with that. But now it's time to go to the doctor over the bye week, figure some things out, and be playing your best in the month of November. November is the bridge to December, to January. And of course, that's when you want to be playing your absolute best football. November is not going to be easy, folks. Iowa on the road, you get Minnesota at home, and then of course those West Coast rivals with USC and Washington now is a 6-2 football team. They look pretty good against Illinois on Saturday. Now, I've been watching a lot of college football on television this fall, and there's been one commercial that's really stood out to me, and I'm like, I kind of look at the backdrop of the commercial, I'm like, that looks familiar. I feel like I've been there, but I wasn't quite able to put my thumb on it until my rewatch on Sunday. I paused it, and the light bulb finally went on. The Old Trapper beef jerky commercial, and I'm like, wait a minute, that is Trillium Lake in the Mount Hood Wilderness. Now, for those of you on the audio podcast platforms, this segment, of course, I'm going to compare it to pictures right now. Might not be the easiest to follow, but I also put this up on Twitter, so you can check it out over there. But the top is a screenshot from the FS1 broadcast in the Old Trapper beef jerky commercial, and the bottom is a photo that I took at Trillium Lake this summer, and the resemblance is uncanny. And then I kind of took it one step further and found out, Old Trapper Beef Jerky is an Oregon-based company, so it all makes sense. Why not keep it local and feature the serene beauty of that area? Even though it's a very highly populated area, and that's maybe one part that drew me away from Trillium when I was out there. It was really cool to finally put the puzzle pieces together in my brain about this ad. Now, of course, people going to make their way to the top of Mount Hood. Skiing season is on its way out there, but we're making our way to the top as far as signing day is concerned. And Friday, of course, after I published my show, it went from a prediction to a commitment for one Braylon Hodge, the 4-star linebacker out of the same Colorado high school that Blake Purchase went to, by the way. 6'3", 212 pounds. The second linebacker commit in this 2026 class for the Ducks, of course, joining Ventura, California's Tristan Phillips. Now, when I was able to kind of turn on his film and kind of watch the highlights quickly with him, he seems to be a little bit more of a developmental player within the system right now. Of course, you've got Dylan Williams, who's seeing some time now that he's healthy. Kamar Mathuti, Gavin Nix, Braden Platt. You got 3 redshirt freshmen in there. You got a true freshman and Gavin Nix. It seems like those guys would most likely be in line above where Hodge is going to come in on campus when he arrives in 2026. And I think considering that frame at 212 pounds, he can probably put on some muscle. He can add some to his frame. You get him at 6'3", 225. even like 230, something like that, and you're able to keep his speed and agility and his aggressiveness, I think he could certainly end up to be a pretty good player when all is said and done. But another added to the 2026 recruiting class for Oregon. I think the best way to describe Oregon's 21-7 victory over Wisconsin on Saturday night in a rainy, wet, soggy Autzen Stadium, turns out it does rain within Autzen Stadium, is a win is a win. You're going to have these types of battles sometimes, even if it's against poor teams. And Wisconsin was certainly a poor team coming into this game. Mother Nature certainly had an effect on the end result and how this game looked on the end. More on that in just a moment. But when you play Power 2 football, the way kind of rosters are evened out a little bit more, you're going to have these types of battles. Heck, Oregon had this type of battle against this very same Wisconsin program last year, where they had to go on the road, play a defensive game, 16-13 after playing for 8 consecutive weeks. That's just kind of how this is. It's the mark of a good team to be able to go in this type of ugly performance where the weather is terrible and you're not playing your best game, and kind of evolve as this game goes on. Do what you need to do to be able to get out there with a W. Like, look at Alabama and South Carolina this past weekend. I mean, there was no weather involved there. South Carolina has not been a good football team this year. And Alabama has looked really good, I think, at times this year, but they needed to come back to be able to get that victory over the Gamecocks. These things are just going to happen. Now, when you're a team as talented as Oregon, going up against a team not very talented, a bad Wisconsin football team, and then you get the result that you got, you can understand why there may be criticisms within the Duck fan base. Now, I will say this. I think some criticisms are fair. I think some other criticisms are maybe a little bit in foul territory. And I've got 4 categories that I want to break down that I want to say, hey, fair or foul. But before I get to that, I want to say one thing. We need to pump the brakes on this woe is us mindset from the result of this Wisconsin game. Like, there's people out there, I saw it in my live chat, I saw it in the comments, I've seen it on the message boards as well. They're saying, oh man, we're going 9-3. We're going to lose to Iowa. We're going to lose to Washington. We might lose to USC. You know, we're average at this. We're not good at this. It's just like, dude, let's all put this into perspective right now. Of course, I was not at the game. I'm 2 time zones away. But I was talking to people that were in the stadium. How I viewed it as far as the television broadcast is the second quarter is when the downpour really started, and you can see the weather have an extreme effect on the game. But in the first quarter, when it was a little bit clear as far as the rain is concerned, there were swirling, big, gusty, swirling winds within the stadium that you might not have been able to notice on television. So let's go back to the preview that I had, and I think a lot of people had this point as well. Like, the big thing that I thought Oregon would be able to attack, the weakness on the Wisconsin defense was their secondary. They were allowing a lot of high productive outputs from opposing quarterbacks this season, especially the really good teams that they face, like the Julian Sayans and the Ty Simpsons, Ohio States and Alabamas of the world. Even some of the true freshmen, the Malik Washingtons and the Bryce Underwoods, put up some pretty good performances against them. But when the wind is swirling the way it is, there were some throws for Dante Moore. It looked like a freaking curveball. There were some throws that sailed high and the wind just kind of carried it a little bit. Like, that part of the game, if you got 20 bullets in your holster, and then all of a sudden, right before kickoff, 10 bullets get taken out of your holster because of the weather, you're not able to attack the weakness of the Wisconsin defense. All of a sudden, if those 20 bullets equal a 42-0 lead at halftime, you don't have that now because of the weather that was on display out there in Autzen Stadium. So let's pump the brakes. I think there's some gray areas. I think we all just need to kind of put this into perspective a little bit. This was an Oregon team that had to kind of battle through the elements out there, and I thought this team did a pretty good job of just battling in a tough game. And there's going to be a tough game coming up. When you go on the road to Iowa, you might have to battle in a game like this, not necessarily with the weather, but, evolving your game a little bit against a team that you're more talented than them. Now, Iowa is a better team, of course, than Wisconsin, but you get the general idea of where I'm going with that. All right, let's dive into kind of these 4 categories that I laid out. Number 1, Dante Moore. I've seen some criticisms from Dante. I'll put foul, but a but along with it, or maybe a little bit of an asterisk with Dante. I talked about the weather. Some of the throws that he was a little bit off on. People, hey, maybe the accuracy wasn't quite there with Dante. He maybe didn't look as good hitting his receivers in stride or something like that as throughout this game. But considering the wind is kind of taking this ball in many different directions, I'm not sure if that is a fair criticism right now. But I want to tackle something else. Wisconsin implemented a very similar game plan that Indiana put in place. Indiana, we're talking zone coverage, we're talking simulated pressures, and I thought the Badgers did some very similar things in that, and you saw maybe not totally what you saw from Dante Moore against Indiana when it comes to pressure and dealing with it and kind of taking all of this information in and reading things correctly. But you did see him get a little bit jumpy. You did see him get a little bit antsy back there in that pocket. And when the pressure kind of got to him, he needs to find a way to begin his pocket awareness. I think when the pressure is consistently getting there, that needs to improve. He needs to get outside the pocket and play just with a little bit more confidence. So we've seen that a few times this season. I think a huge key going forward for Oregon is to be able to keep Dante Moore clean. I think because of this. But that's kind of one thing where it's like, okay, maybe you can criticize him a little bit, that needs to be better. He needs to be better at handling significant pressure from some of the defenses this season. Now, let's get into kind of the backside that I mentioned there and the offensive line consistencies, or maybe should I say inconsistencies, because we've seen it this year. We've seen the offensive line play really well at times. We have seen them maybe not play not as well at times. And I think it is a fair criticism from this game when you take a look at the inconsistent play of the offensive line. It felt like a roller coaster, really. At first, it started off with 2 sacks allowed on the first 2 drives. I mean, this was an Oregon team that only rushed the ball for 39 yards in the first half, excuse me. It was not good. It was not good. I mean, the linebackers were flowing to the football. The Wisconsin defensive line was playing on the other side of the line of scrimmage. Oregon kind of had a little bit of a difficulties really getting their traction up front of the offensive line to be able to start this game. But then as the game went on, they got a lot better. And then it was like, dude, with this weather out here, we just got to invest in this run game. We got to let these big boys eat up front. And then once the second quarter got in a little bit, and then especially once you got to the second half a lot more, then they're able to kind of do their thing as far as the run game goes. So this is an offensive line that needs to be more consistent. I think that needs to be more consistently good. We'll see how this kind of goes the rest of the season coming off of this game against Wisconsin. Criticism of the play calling. I'm going to call a foul on this one. Will Stein can be a lightning rod. Some people think he's the greatest thing in the world sometimes, and then there's some other weeks where some people are saying, yeah, let's get him to take a head coaching job so we can get somebody else in here. But I think it's foul. Once again, we come back to the weather. The weather had a lot to do, I think, with this and making this game as even as it was, or as it appeared to be, at least I'll say it that way. But I'll say this about Will Stein. I mean, he was throwing a lot of lateral passes, a lot of short passing game early on in this matchup, because I think the further you threw it down the field, the more possibility it was to be able to create a turnover. I think Will Stein made the conscious decision, we're going to protect the ball. We feel that our defense is going to be able to hold this Wisconsin offense scoreless for a majority of the game, which they did. Let's protect the ball, not put it into harm's way, and then let's run the crap out of the football. And then especially when Dante Moore went down in the second half, when you throw Brock Thomas in there, you're going to run the hell out of the football, I think, at that point in time. So, maybe it was a little bit slower to be able to adjust as time went on. But I think once he kind of made that decision, okay, we're going to run the hell out of the football and just get out of here with a win, once again, a win is a win. You're going to have these games sometimes. So right now, as far as this game is concerned, I'm calling a little bit of a foul. And I think he noticed that Jordan Davidson was the hot hand for this Ducks offense. And he's like, I'm going to keep on giving the ball to Zero. I'm going to keep on giving the ball to Zero. I'm going to keep on giving him the football. And good things happen. He got better as this game went on. Okay, let's talk about the run defense. I think that this is a fair criticism right now. And it's not necessarily because of the defensive line. Look, this was a Wisconsin offense. They could not throw the ball. Hunter Simmons could not put the ball in the air. I mean, Spencer Petras, Deacon Hill, remember those bad Iowa quarterbacks under Brian Ferentz? That's what this was. Okay, there was no threat of the passing game. And then when you factor in the weather, there was especially no threat of the passing game down the field. You had a patchwork offensive line due to injury for the Badgers. You were down to a fourth string running back, and you saw this Wisconsin rushing offense have a decent amount of success. I mean, like I said before to start this thing, I don't think there's a ton of criticisms to throw around with the defensive line, but I will say this. I mean, there are some games out there, and I think this is one of them, where Mateo Uiagalelei just, I don't want to put it too harsh, but there's some games where it just seems like he doesn't show up. Like there's some games where he's just not as consistently good or maybe as consistently aggressive as maybe he is in some other games. I think Tatum Tuioti is consistently that way. I thought Amari Washington and Bear Alexander continue to be a really good combination in the middle. You saw it from both of those guys in these games, but I mean, I see it with Mateo. I see him getting kind of driven back in like a one-on-one matchup. Not necessarily a double team, but a one-on-one matchup. I see him kind of getting driven back a little bit. So you need to find a way for Mateo to kind of be more consistently aggressive and consistently playing at that high level that I think we all know that he can play at. But I think when it comes to the criticism of the run defense, my bullet point here, I just have linebackers, man, ... I mean, we have seen other teams that Oregon has played this year. We've seen Indiana and Aiden Fisher, how aggressive he is, taking that confident first step, reading the play, just taking on blocks with his shoulder and just mashing and destroying the hole. And then you saw Mason Posa, the young player for Wisconsin. He did the same thing. Oregon just does not have that at the linebacker position, man. Too many times I'm watching this tape and Bryce Betcher offensive linemen are getting to the second level, and Bryce Betcher's making tackles 6 yards down the field. He's making tackles 7 yards down the field. He's making tackles 8 yards down the field. I mean, game by game, this kind of continues to be a weak point of the defense. Guys not making the right reads in the run fits as well. Linebackers don't necessarily have those big-time collisions when offensive linemen get to the second level. They're able to push them through. And they're, these linebackers aren't able to kind of take these blocks on and stop the offensive lineman from gaining more momentum down the field. So linebackers has been a fair criticism, and this really stood out to me, especially when Wisconsin was able to gain that success in the run game. These linebackers weren't stepping into the hole. They weren't doing this defense any favors. I think the defensive line and the secondary are really good units. I think the secondary is probably reading the run a lot better right now than the linebackers are. And I might be dumping it on pretty good right now in this group, but I just don't want to get in a situation where maybe even if it's down the road in the regular season, like especially against a team like Iowa, they're the top graded run blocking offensive line in the entire country right now. I just don't want to get in a situation where a team can just grind you down because you don't have aggressive linebackers that can read the play correctly and step up and make a good play. Wisconsin was pinned deep in their own territory. You had Bryce Betcher take that aggressive first step, Devin Jackson take an aggressive first step and make a play. And you saw little to no gain. I think there was maybe even a TFL in there as well. So it's a fair criticism when you look at the success that Wisconsin had in the run game that they really shouldn't have, I think, against Oregon in this ball game. So we'll see how these criticisms evolve over the remainder of the season. But I got 2 on the fair side, 2 on the foul side. It kind of goes into the theme of this being a little bit of a gray area and a tougher game to read. We need to drain this negativity from the last segment and those criticisms and inject some positivity right now into this program. And that's exactly what I'm going to do right now with my Holy Wallowa Awards for week number 9 and the Wisconsin game. Let's begin, as we always do, with my honorable mentions. And the run game was paramount to the success of Oregon throughout this game. Over 200 yards on the ground. Noah Whittington, 14 carries, 97 yards. And it's the second consecutive week where he looked explosive coming off of an injury. Of course, he had the injury before Penn State. Didn't look outstanding. Indiana, kind of the same type of stuff. But Rutgers is really when he started to get those explosive runs down the field. And we saw some big chunk yardage run, 20, 30, 40-yard runs in this matchup against Wisconsin. And like someone that I'm going to be talking about a little bit later as my sole Holy Wallowa winner, it seemed like Noah got stronger as this game went on. I think he's got a lot of patience in reading the blocks, and then once he's able to hit the hole, he can get through there and explode it. And I like his vision and acceleration in the open field. So Noah Whittington, I think, is certainly back to full strength, and this performance against Wisconsin was another proving ground to that. Let's throw one out. Our first Holy Wallowa of the year to old number 11, Jeremiah McClellan. Now, due to the weather conditions, there wasn't a lot of downfield passing and maybe a lot of opportunities for the pass catchers to get involved. But when they did fire the ball down the field consistently, it was Jeremiah McClellan. I mean, there was a drive in the first half. He had a 20-yard completion over the middle from Dante Moore, and that was looking, that nothing really ended up in that drive, but it looked like that would be the spark of a good drive going down the field. 3 catches for 40 yards. So when they were looking to create something, he was somebody that they looked to consistently throughout this Wisconsin game. So we'll see how that evolves. We know there could be Evan Stewart coming back in November, so we'll see what the role looks like for Jeremiah McClellan. But I think he looked good, all things considered, during this matchup. Tatum Tuioti. Now, he didn't have the greatest game in the world against Indiana, but he has just been so consistently good. And I think and then coming off of the edge in this game, 5 tackles, I thought he once again played a really good game. He was my defensive MVP at the last bye week. He's my defensive MVP at this bye week as well. It's the same type of stuff, playing disciplined football, always in the right spot at the right time. I think playing above a level that a lot of us expected 44 to be able to play at this year. Let's stay on the defensive side of the ball. I want to talk about one Dylan Thieneman at safety. I thought he played a really good game. This was arguably his best game as an Oregon Duck. 7 tackles and 2 PBUs. A lot of times when the linebackers, and there's been some issues, I just talked about it in the last segment with the linebackers, when they're not able to step in and step up, Dylan Thieneman is often the guy out there that's cleaning up the mess. And this game was a great example of that. He had the highest PFF tackle grade from the team in this game, 83.1, and the other had the highest coverage grade, 83.5. 2 PBUs had some really good coverage reps, sticking on the hip pocket of a receiver when Wisconsin tried to get some things going down the field, and Dylan Thieneman just said, yeah, that's not happening. So overall, the secondary is playing really good football. It's one of the best in the country right now. And, last week I said, Brandon Finney and Aaron Flowers are the top defensive backs, and maybe Dylan Thieneman heard that a little bit. And he says, Ted, I'm going to show you, hey, just how good I am. And Thieneman is he's a great player. He's kind of that Tampa 2 high linebacker type of look. I think they really trust him in reading the run and kind of being that bigger safety, smaller linebacker type of guy that can read the run really well. Got to throw out Amari Washington. I think when Oregon had success in really stuffing the run, creating negative plays, creating plays where they rushed for no gain, 1 yard, 2 yards, things like that, it was largely due to Amari Washington. 4 tackles. He had an 84.4 PFF run defense grade, which was the highest against the team. It's the same stuff that we've seen from Amari all year long. It's timing snaps. It's pushing guys back. And, when you're a defensive tackle, you're not going to be the guy that's going to have 7, 8, 9 tackles during a game. Okay, it's about pushing guys into the play, kind of plugging gaps and plugging holes, so the run game has to bounce it to another side where the play was not designed for, and now you allow other players on the defense to be able to kind of scoop up some of those plays as well. So Amari Washington playing another great game in the middle. We have one solo Holy Wallowa winner for the week, and you think you know who it is. It is the true freshman out of modern-day Santa Ana, California, that being Jordan Davidson. 16 carries, 102 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Here's what I will say. Keep on feeding this guy the football. Okay, when you feed the beast gets stronger. And I thought Jordan Davidson got stronger every time he touched the football. When you have a frame like he does, and you're in there, you're breaking tackles, and you continue to run downhill the way he is. We're at a point in Jordan Davidson's development where he has gone from a power goal line back to one of the most dependent backs and one of the best running backs that Oregon can consistently depend on in this team. If I'm looking at the Iowa game, the Minnesota game, I'm looking down the schedule, I want to feed him the football. Like, I think right now the running back rotation is, let's go 1A, 1B with Noah Whittington and Jordan Davidson, and then your change of pace and your speed guy, of course, is De'Aaron Hill behind them as well. He provided the spark for Oregon's offense to really get going. When they're pinned at the 1-yard line, Oregon, of course, goes 16 plays, 99 yards down the field for the touchdown. On that drive, he carried the ball 9 times for 49 yards. And I talk about getting better as the game goes on. He got better and stronger as this drive went on. His first 2 carries, just, 1 carry, 2 yards, 1 carry, 2 yards. So a couple of yards on his first 2 carries. But then his next runs, the rest of the drive, 7 yards, 11 yards, 11 yards, 6 yards, and 4 yards. He averaged 5.4 yards per carry that drive. And then you look at some of those other touchdowns. He had a 20-yard touchdown a little bit later on in this game. He can finish near the goal line. He can read plays. He's quicker than a lot of people know, I think, around college football. When they look at a 230-pound running back, they maybe look at A to B. They look at straight ahead. But he's got a lot. He's showing his shiftiness, I think, every time he gets into these situations. I absolutely love what Jordan Davidson is doing right now in this power running game. You got some big boys up front on the offensive line. I think they love blocking for a guy like Jordan Davidson, getting this run game going downhill. It was certainly fun to watch on Saturday. What a wild time to be alive in college football. We haven't even gotten to Halloween yet. The Penn State job is open. The Florida job is open. And now with the firing of Brian Kelly, the LSU job is open. What a wild head coaching carousel that this has been and that it is going to be. I mean, there's going to be people that are in a pretty good job that are going to leave for some of these high-profile jobs. And then you have that pretty good job is open, and these dominoes just continue to fall and fall and fall. I think a lot of people within the Duck fan base feel really comfortable that Dan Lanning is not going to go to any of these jobs. In fact, I have a lot of confidence myself that Dan Lanning will not leave Oregon unless it's for a National Football League coaching opportunity. Now, with all of this instability right now, there are 2 opportunities for Dan Lanning and Oregon right now to really flex their muscle. There is a lot of highly recruited talent on like LSU. They've been putting together some really good recruiting classes with Brian Kelly. Even Florida with Billy Napier had some really good talent. Penn State, maybe not as high as Florida and LSU, still had some pretty good players. It's time to go all in on these recruiting wins. It's time to attack the transfer portal. And I have to imagine, we know Oregon has been great into the portal. There's going to be a lot of options available for a lot of people to come to Eugene. Remember when Dan Lanning, you hear it at the beginning of every edition of TSOW, when he said, the grass is damn green in Eugene. If you're scared of your coach leaving, come to Oregon. You get a fired coach, come to Oregon. You have elite players from departing with the coach that's departing, come to Oregon. It's a great opportunity once again. Dan Lanning and the Ducks have proved it before, but it's another chance for Dan that in this world of turmoil and coaching rumors and all of this instability, it is an opportunity to sell stability more than anything. When you're talking about kids in recruiting, when you're talking about kids in the portal, and they'll be like, well, I don't know if this coach is going to leave if I go here, or if that coach is going to leave if I go there. Dan Lanning can continue to say, the proof is in the pudding. I had a chance to go to Alabama, didn't go. I had a chance to go to Texas A&M, didn't go. If this cycle comes and goes, had a chance to LSU, didn't go. Okay, you've got some of the most high-profile jobs with so much resources down south, and yet he's still staying here where there's a lot of resources in Eugene, Oregon. It's a chance for him to kind of continue to build those blocks and say, we're as stable as can be right now in Eugene. Now, when these types of firings take place, you look at players on the rosters that the Ducks have been connected with in the past. And there's two players really that stand out right now on LSU's roster. Deuce Geralds is a 2026 defensive line commitment. I think he was at one time actually predicted to land at Oregon, but then towards the end, late this summer, he ended up committing to LSU. DJ Pickett is a corner from the 2025 class, a 6'4", 6'5", long athletic corner that's been doing some good things on the field for the Tigers this season. He was also predicted at one time to land at Oregon, but then he went to LSU a little bit later on in his recruiting process. So let's start first with one Deuce Geralds. Now, the defensive line recruiting has been taking some bumps. They've been taking some hits. Of course, you lost Tamahini Tupoy. Baba Latalo, goes to be an offensive lineman at BYU. And then they had their sights on top 2027 defensive tackle Jalen Brewster. Lost out on him. He goes over to Texas Tech, and this is a position that I think is one of the positions of needs in recruiting right now for the Ducks. So to be able to kind of go out there and say, hey, Deuce, you see what we're doing with Amari Washington? You see what we're doing in a transfer with Bear Alexander playing the best football of his career? This would be a big-time get for a big-time position of need, I think, in this cycle right now. Another guy, let's talk about DJ Pickett. I think there's some complications that kind of go to this one, because if you want to get DJ Pickett out of the transfer portal, you're going to need to pay a pretty penny. But more on that in just a moment. Now, if you're able to get DJ Pickett to come over to Eugene, you are going to have the best corner combination in the country next season, opposite of Brandon Finney. But there may be some other effects if you pursue DJ, and then if you also land DJ as well. You have Naeem Offord on the other side. Now, Naeem Offord committed, of course, before Mekhi Hughes, before his brother committed to there as well. So he was brought into Oregon first in the process. Mekhi Hughes, when he came over, and we know he's going to be departing the program, but we know when he came over, a big reason why was because Naeem was already on this Oregon team at that point in time. But if you go out getting somebody like Pickett, I think what has happened so far with Naeem Offord, maybe he hasn't played at the level of somebody like a Brandon Finney. Not a lot of people do play out of high school at the level of a Brandon Finney. I think we need to be able to make that clear right out of the gate. But if you go out and get somebody like Pickett with already Ife Obadegu in the room, all of a sudden Naeem Offord is looking around and he's like CB4, maybe CB5, or depending on how the room shakes out and depending on what it looks like next season. And then he could elect to go somewhere else. So can you spend a lot of money, bring DJ Pickett in, and have yourself a dynamic corner duo? Yes, but if you look around at the cornerback room right now, as you're looking forward towards next season, and now's kind of the time with these fired coaches. I know we want to focus on ball right now, but it's a bye week. I think this is a really good time to kind of look to the future. You need, considering the way the college football calendar is, you need to be able to look to the future like this. But you look at Brandon Finney, Ife Obadegu, and Naeem Offord. That is a really good secondary right off the top, right out of the gate. I think that there can be more resources poured into other parts of this team where it is going to be needed next season, because like I said at the beginning of this, you're going to need to pay a lot of money to be able to get somebody like DJ Pickett. Pour a lot of money into a position group in the secondary where there's already a ton of really good players, and you've got some really good players coming in this year's recruiting class, like one Devon Benjamin, Jet Washington is more of a safety, but you get the general idea. There's great players all over this thing. So maybe pouring into positions like linebacker or offensive line might be a better strategy, and that's kind of where I want to finish with this. Look, I love the confidence that Dan Lanning had after the spring game at linebacker, but I think it's clear that they are going to need high-level players. Because you're going forward towards next season of guys that are on the roster, you're relying on some of these like these 4-star redshirt freshmen to kind of step up into bigger roles. You're probably going to have Devin Jackson and Jerry Mixon back, but I think you're going to need an elite linebacker. Like, if I'm Dan Lanning, if I'm Marshall, if I'm kind of starting to put together a plan of what I want this 2026 portal plan to look like, I might be putting in more money than anything into a linebacker, into having like an elite presence to really raise the profile of this defense. Like, this entire offensive line could be gone. There's players I think they like coming up, but I think you're going to need at least one really good offensive line transfer for next season. So there's kind of some complications to be able to watch out for. And there's so much domino effects. People think about it in coaches, but recruits are so tied to coaches nowadays. I mean, there were rumors about Texas, about Steve Sarkisian over the weekend. He kind of shot him down a little bit during the post-game press conference. But if he goes to the NFL, does that open the door for Tyler Atkinson at linebacker? They probably won't go over Richard Wesley again, but you get the idea of what I'm going out there with. What if Jed Fish leaves for a coaching job? Does that open the door for one Cody Green to come back to Oregon? I'm not sure if it does. His brother plays on the team. Of course, he's from that area. Kelvin Oba. What if Kyle Whittingham retires? Now, we're not talking about departing or fired, but we're talking about a coaching change. Does that open the door? Oregon is going to be very aggressive. They are not done certainly as far as their 2026 recruiting class. I think there's going to be a lot more fireworks before the early signing period, and I think this is a team that is going to be more aggressive than any in the transfer portal, and being able to sell that stability will be a big factor towards having the success in terms of acquiring this type of talent going forward. All right. Another great edition of That Show Out West is in the books. We'll see you later on during the week. We've got some interviews with some guests coming on, maybe playing a little bit of a podcast home and home. So stay tuned for that a little bit later on in the week. All right. Until then, I'm Ted LaBrue. This has been That Show Out West.